Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us.
It's great to be back.
Today, we're looking at, it's an excerpt, actually,
Okay.
from a Christian evangelical devotional text.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Fight for Your Faith,
Okay.
which is,
You like that?
yeah, pretty strong, huh?
Yeah.
And specifically what we're going to be unpacking is this idea of generational paralysis,
Oh, wow.
which the text describes as this thing that's holding us back,
Okay.
you know, across different areas of our life. And you might be thinking, paralysis, isn't that like a physical thing?
Right.
But this text kind of takes it a step further and says that it can impact us spiritually,
Okay.
emotionally,
Yeah.
financially,
Mm.
even relationally.
Wow. That's fascinating.
So, I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, is that how you kind of...
Well, it's fascinating because it makes me think about, like, you know, all those times we feel stuck. You know, whether it's in your career or in your relationship or even just like in personal growth, it kind of asks us to consider, you know, maybe those feelings have roots that go way back,
Yeah.
you know, further than just our own lives.
Okay, so, like, check this out, all right? So the text uses this example
Yeah.
of a man who is paralyzed for 38 years,
Okay.
which is almost a full biblical generation.
Wow.
So it really got me thinking, like, is this suggesting that feeling of being stuck can almost become like a hereditary trait?
That's a great question, and that's where this concept of generational paralysis gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because the text seems to be arguing that, you know, we might be carrying burdens or limitations that have been passed down to us without even realizing it. It's almost like, you know, those subconscious family patterns or beliefs that kind of shape our behavior and our choices.
Oh, okay, I see.
You know, like, imagine, like, the financial anxieties that your grandparents may have experienced during the Depression.
Right.
Or the, you know, the fear of failure that might have been really prominent in your parents' generation.
Okay.
Those things can kind of linger and influence us, even if we don't consciously recognize them.
So then if we're potentially carrying all this baggage, like, how do we even begin to identify, like, what's ours and what might be, I mean, what's the word, inherited?
Well, the text actually lists a bunch of potential causes for this paralysis, and it's kind of a laundry list, you know? It's sin, it's past failures, it's fear of taking risks, condemnation, self-pity, the opinions of others.
Oh, wow.
It kind of goes on, and I think recognizing those patterns is kind of the first step. It's like shining a light on the things that might be holding us back and saying, you know, okay, is this really me, or is this something that I've kind of absorbed from my family or my environment?
You know, this makes me think about this one point that the text makes that really struck me.
Oh yeah.
It specifically mentions social media.
Okay.
And screen time as being like these modern day contributors to this paralysis.
Oh, interesting.
So how does that fit into this broader idea of, like, you know, inherited limitations?
That's a really insightful observation.
Okay.
Because it seems like the text is highlighting this tension between genuine connection and this constant need for validation that we often see in the digital world.
Right.
You know, and on one hand, connection with others is so crucial for our support and for our growth.
Right.
But on the other hand, this constant seeking of online approval can actually make us feel more inadequate and more stuck.
Right.
So it's almost like social media is adding another layer to the problem. You know, it's amplifying those feelings of inadequacy and comparison that might already be present within family.
So it's not that, like, technology is inherently bad.
Right.
But maybe it's just like how we're using it.
Exactly.
You know, and whether it's helping or hindering our growth.
It's about being mindful of how these digital platforms make us feel and whether they're contributing to that sense of paralysis or helping us break free from it.
Okay, so let's say we've identified some areas where we feel paralyzed.
Okay.
What's the next step?
Well,
the text seems pretty clear.
Yeah.
It calls on us to arise through faith.
Rise. Okay. But what does that even look like?
Right.
It sounds kind of, I don't know, intense.
Well, arise is definitely a powerful word.
Yeah.
And it's where the text moves beyond just identifying the problem.
Okay.
It's a call to action. It's an invitation to take ownership of our lives and move forward intentionally.
Right.
It's suggesting that faith isn't passive.
Okay.
It's about actively engaging with our beliefs and taking steps to break free from these generational patterns.
Yeah.
And that can feel intense.
Yeah.
Because it requires us to confront those deep-seated fears and limitations that have been holding us back.
So it's not just about thinking positive thoughts, like it's about an actual like tangible change.
Yes.
But what does that action even look like?
Well, the text provides a bunch of prayers.
Okay.
Which we'll get into a bit later.
Okay.
But beyond the specific words, I think it's about a shift in mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that you have the power
Right.
to choose a different path, to break free from those inherited limitations, and to create a new legacy for yourself and for future generations.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But we've got sin, we've got past failures, we've got fear. I mean, the text throws out a whole laundry list of things
that can contribute to this feeling of being stuck.
Right.
Is there like a hierarchy to these paralyzers?
I think what's important here isn't necessarily ranking the causes.
Okay.
But understanding how they connect.
Okay.
So for example, the text talks about the poverty mentality.
Okay.
This belief that you'll never have enough.
Right.
Imagine a family where that belief has been passed down for generations due to actual economic hardship.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really tough to break free from that mindset, even if your current financial situation is different.
Right.
So that feeling of scarcity can impact your financial decisions, your relationships, and even your overall outlook on life.
This reminds me of something that I read about how trauma can actually be passed down through generations.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not just about the stories we hear, but it's like actual changes happening at a cellular level.
Oh, wow.
So could this spiritual paralysis be linked to that?
That's a fascinating connection.
Yeah.
There's a growing body of research in epigenetics that suggests that trauma can indeed leave a mark on our DNA, which can then be passed down to our children.
Wow.
And while the text doesn't delve into the science of it all, the idea that spiritual or emotional patterns can be inherited in a similar way is really intriguing. It speaks to the power of our family history and the need to understand those influences if we want to truly break free.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been unpacking this whole idea of generational paralysis.
Yeah.
And how these past limitations and beliefs can kind of impact us today.
Right.
Now, the text offers this really powerful antidote. Faith.
Okay.
But it goes beyond just believing, right?
Right.
It calls for action. It actually says, fight for your faith.
Okay.
So what do you make of that?
Well, it's a strong image, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, fighting implies like effort, intentionality, and this recognition that breaking free isn't always easy.
Okay.
It's like saying, this isn't a passive process. You have to actively engage. You have to wrestle with those patterns and limitations.
And the text actually provides a bunch of prayers to help with that.
It does, yeah.
What struck me is that it's not just about asking for help.
Right.
Some of them are super declarative.
Okay.
Almost like you're taking authority over the situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So how does that tie into this idea of fighting?
Right.
I mean, is it like a mental shift? Where believing you already have this power helps you to break free?
That's a great question, and it actually makes me think about like sports psychology.
Okay.
You know how athletes will visualize success in order to improve their performance? So could these declarative prayers work in a similar way?
Okay.
By stating your freedom as fact, are you kind of priming your mind to actually achieve it?
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
But the text also includes, prayers for protection.
Right.
Like shielding yourself from spiritual attacks. I mean, isn't that a bit?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, wouldn't some say it's a bit much?
Well, it definitely gets into spiritual warfare territory.
Right.
Which can be a bit intense for some.
Right.
But I think the text is acknowledging that breaking free from these deeply ingrained patterns, it often feels like a battle.
Right.
You're up against your own habits, maybe some external pressures, and this unseen layer of inherited beliefs.
Right.
So the prayers for protection could be a way to kind of bolster yourself emotionally and spiritually for that fight.
Okay. So this kind of makes me wonder if generational paralysis can impact us negatively,
right?
Could the opposite be true?
Right.
Like, can we inherit strengths or positive traits in the same way?
Now, that is a provocative thought.
Yeah.
The text doesn't explicitly say that, but it opens up a really interesting line of inquiry.
Yeah.
You know, if these limitations can be passed down, why not resilience? Why not faith?
Right.
Why not, you know, a knack for problem solving?
Yeah.
You know, the things that helped our ancestors thrive.
Right.
It really kind of reframes this whole idea of legacy, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like breaking the bad,
Right.
but actively building on the good that we've inherited.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that might be a really powerful motivator.
Okay.
You know, imagine if you're not just fighting against the past,
Right.
but you're fighting for something. You're carrying a torch that's been passed down through generations.
Okay, so let's talk practical steps here.
Okay.
We've got these prayers, this idea of fighting.
Right.
But where does someone like actually start?
Yeah.
I mean, is there like a step-by-step guide to breaking free?
You know, the text doesn't offer a numbered list, which I think is a good thing.
Okay.
It means it's adaptable to your unique situation.
Okay.
But there are these common threads. For example, you know, a lot of the prayers emphasize gratitude.
Right.
And that's a really powerful starting point, I think. It's shifting that focus from what's wrong to what's already good in your life.
So it's like building a foundation of strength
Yes.
before you tackle the big stuff.
Exactly. And then there are prayers for discernment.
Okay.
You know, asking for the wisdom to see those areas where you're truly stuck versus just facing those normal life challenges.
Because sometimes it's hard to tell the difference.
Right.
Right.
Like, is this just a tough week, or is this that old fear of failure creeping in again?
It's that constant discernment.
Yeah.
And once you have that clarity, that's when the fighting comes in.
Okay.
You know, maybe it's setting boundaries in a relationship that kind of echoes those unhealthy family dynamics.
Okay.
Or finally tackling that financial plan that you've been putting off because of that inherited scarcity mindset.
So action looks different for everyone.
Right.
But it's always tied to the specific patterns that you've identified.
Exactly.
Right.
And the text repeatedly stresses that this isn't a solo mission.
Okay.
You know, there are prayers for your family, for your community.
Right.
It's acknowledging that we break free together,
Right.
not just individually.
And that kind of ties back to that question about inherited strengths, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we're not just passing down burdens, but also, you know, the tools to overcome them.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
So it's not just about you breaking free.
Right.
It's about contributing to this ongoing legacy of resilience, of faith, of whatever positive traits your family line carries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, identifying those generational patterns, this idea of faith as an active force.
Right.
You know, prayer is a tool for both empowerment and protection. But the text also gets into some pretty specific social commentary, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
You know, it mentions relativism
Right.
and cultural decay
Yeah.
as contributing to this paralysis.
That's right. It's definitely a particular perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone will agree
Right.
with this assessment of modern society.
Right.
But understanding where the text is coming from helps us to see how these beliefs inform its overall message.
Because honestly, when I first read that section, it felt a bit out of place.
Okay.
It's like, how does cultural decay
Right.
fit into this whole idea of personal and generational healing?
Right. Right. Well, it's worth remembering that this text comes from a specific theological standpoint.
Okay.
And from that perspective, there's a belief that societal trends away from certain moral absolutes contribute to a weakening of faith,
Okay.
which then makes individuals more susceptible to those negative patterns.
So it's like saying a weakened society leads to weakened individuals,
Exactly.
which then makes those generational patterns even harder to break.
Exactly. Now, whether or not you agree with that assessment is a whole other discussion.
Right.
But understanding that connection helps us to see how the text's worldview shapes its approach to breaking free from this paralysis.
Okay, so we've got this multi-layered thing happening.
Yeah.
We've got these personal limitations, we've got these family patterns,
Right.
and even this idea of societal influences,
Right.
all playing a role
Yeah.
in this paralysis.
Right.
So where do we even go from here?
I think the text offers us two really powerful takeaways.
Okay.
The first is that awareness is key.
Right.
Without identifying those patterns, whether they're personal, familial, or even cultural, we can't effectively fight against them.
Okay.
And the second is that faith in this context isn't just about belief.
Mhm.
It's about action. It's about that intentional effort to break free and to build something better.
So it's like saying, okay, I see the problem, now what am I going to do about it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the doing will look different for everyone.
Right.
But that commitment to action, that's where the real transformation happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been exploring this whole concept of generational paralysis, right?
Right.
And this text call to fight for our faith to break free.
Mhm.
But this whole conversation has me thinking, like, if these negative patterns can be passed down,
Yeah.
what about the positives?
Right.
Can we actively inherit strengths and resilience too?
Okay.
Or is that getting too optimistic?
Well, I love that you're flipping the script here.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the breaking free aspect, but you're right.
Right.
There's this whole other side to legacy.
Right.
And while the text focuses on overcoming the limitations,
Right.
it does repeatedly emphasize God's enduring mercy,
Right.
his faithfulness across generations.
So it's like even if our families have faced hardships
Right.
or carried unhealthy patterns, there's still this underlying foundation
Yeah.
of strength and blessing to draw on.
Precisely. And that's where the idea of fighting for your faith takes on a new dimension. It's not just about fighting against the negative, but for those positive inheritances.
Okay.
The resilience that your grandmother showed raising a family during tough times,
Right.
the work ethic that got your dad through college, those things become part of your spiritual DNA too.
So this makes me think about the prayers in the text.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them focus on aligning yourself with God's will, asking for guidance and strength.
Right.
Could that be a way to tap into those inherited strengths?
Yeah.
Like you're not just creating this from scratch,
Right.
but activating something that's already there.
That's a brilliant connection.
Oh, right.
It's like instead of seeing yourself as this isolated individual battling alone,
Right.
you're connecting to this lineage of faith and resilience that's been going on for generations.
Mm-hmm.
You're drawing on that collective strength to overcome the challenges you face.
And maybe, just maybe, we're adding to that strength,
Right?
making it even stronger
Absolutely.
for the generations that come after us.
No. That's what's so empowering about this whole concept. It's not just about personal liberation.
Right.
It's about contributing to this ongoing narrative of faith and resilience. You're not just breaking free, you're becoming a part of something bigger than yourself.
Okay, so let's get super practical here.
Okay.
Let's say someone listening to this realizes, yeah, I do feel stuck in some areas.
Yeah.
And maybe it is connected to my family history.
Right.
What's their first step?
Well, the text encourages starting with gratitude.
Okay.
Even if your family background is messy, what are the good things that you can acknowledge?
Yeah.
That might be a strong work ethic. It might be a sense of humor. It might even just be the fact that your ancestors survived some tough times. It's about shifting your focus from what's wrong to what's already right.
Because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's easy to forget
Absolutely.
those positives, right?
Gratitude helps reframe things. And from there, you can start asking those tough questions. Okay, where do I really feel stuck? What patterns keep showing up? And could those be connected to my family history?
And maybe it's not even about blame, right?
Yeah.
It's just acknowledging that these influences exist so you can start working with them.
Exactly. It's about understanding the source of the paralysis so you can apply the right antidote.
Which brings us back to those prayers.
Right.
How can someone practically use them to break free?
Right.
Is it about reciting them word for word, or is it something deeper?
I think it's less about the literal words and more about the principles they embody.
Okay.
So, for example, several prayers emphasize asking for discernment,
Right.
the wisdom to see your situation clearly and make wise choices.
Oh.
And that's something you can do regardless of your religious beliefs. It's about getting quiet, reflecting, and asking for guidance.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there are those declarative prayers,
Yes.
right? Like the one for breaking generational curses.
Mm-hmm.
How does someone practically apply that?
Well, I think that's where the fight comes in.
Okay.
It's about taking a stand against those negative patterns and saying, no more. This stops with me.
Well,
It's about making a conscious choice to break the cycle, to embrace a different path.
right.
And that might involve setting boundaries, seeking therapy, or even just changing your self-talk.
So it's not about waiting for a miracle.
Right.
It's about taking those tangible steps.
Exactly. And I love that the text also emphasizes community.
Right.
You know, there are prayers for families, for the church.
Right.
It's recognizing that we're not in this alone.
Yeah.
Having a supportive network can make a huge difference in breaking free.
Because sometimes those inherited patterns are so ingrained in our family dynamics.
Right.
It's hard to see them clearly
Yeah.
without an outside perspective, right?
Absolutely. And having people who believe in you, who support your growth,
Yeah.
can be crucial. It's like, you know, you're not just fighting for yourself, you're
Yeah.
fighting for each other, for a future where those limitations no longer hold you back.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It
We've gone from feeling stuck
Yeah.
to understanding those deeper influences
Yeah.
to literally rewriting our legacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But I think the key takeaway is this. You're not defined by your past or your family history.
Right.
You have the power to choose a different path, to break free from those limitations, and to build something better, something stronger for yourself and for the generations that come after you.
And that's a message worth fighting for.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this. What are the positive traits and strengths you want to cultivate and pass on?
Yeah.
How can you be a part of breaking those negative cycles and
Yeah.
building a legacy of faith, resilience, and hope?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those are questions worth pondering.
Absolutely. Keep diving deep. Keep challenging those inherited patterns and keep fighting for the legacy you want to create. Until next time.
See you later.